I stepped into my husband's car and saw something in the glove compartment that didn't belong there. A small, unfamiliar tube, out of place like a secret waiting to be discovered. I didn't say a word. I only replaced it with something that would expose its truth in the most irreversible way. What happened next would bring flashing lights, shouting neighbors, and a late-night visit from the fire department. I'm glad you're here. If you're listening, stay with me to the end of this story of quiet revenge and tell me in the comments how far it has traveled. I sat alone at the kitchen table. The silence in the house hung thick, heavy, the kind that seems to press on your chest until even the clock feels louder than breath. That old clock, a wedding gift from my late mother, ticked with cruel precision, each beat accusing me of something I didn't yet understand. Julian had just come home from one of his endless business dinners. He looked drained, not the kind of tired work gives you, but the kind that secrets leave behind. His face carried lines I didn't remember drawing. Guilt and fatigue had carved new geography across his eyes. He tossed his jacket onto the sofa, loosened his tie as though escaping a noose, and collapsed onto the bed without a word. His cologne lingered. Expensive, familiar. Yet beneath it floated another scent, faint and foreign, floral and wrong. It felt like someone else's fingerprint on my life. Moments later, his breathing deepened into the rhythm of sleep, a sound that once meant safety. Now it mocked me, a lullaby for the fool I had become. I rose quietly, the way a wife of 40 years learns to move, soundless, measured, invisible. I gathered what he'd left scattered. His jacket, wallet, phone, the old laptop he still swore by. The phone screen was glowing, a small rectangle of light in the dark room, an email open, waiting. Julian never used email. He used to joke, "Juliet, technology's for people who don't know how to talk." And yet, there it was, a digital whisper from a life I hadn't been invited to. Curiosity pulled me in like gravity. The message was short, only a few words, but they cracked something deep inside me. "You were incredible tonight, Dad." The red heart blinked against the white screen, each pixel cutting colder than any blade. "Dad." The word echoed through the quiet house. Who would call him that, Magan, in such an intimate tone? My thumb trembled as I scrolled, searching for clues, but the address was nonsense, letters and numbers tangled like lies. A chill climbed up my spine, the kind that has nothing to do with temperature. Through the doorway, I saw him stir, turn, settle again into peace. His face looked harmless, almost boyish. The contrast made me sick. I set the phone back exactly where it had been. My hands shook so badly I had to grip the table just to breathe. Still moving automatically, I gathered his clothes for the wash. In one pocket, a crisp folded paper waited. A receipt. A high-end steakhouse in San Antonio. Tonight's date, San Antonio. He'd told me he was in Dallas. A thin laugh escaped me, sharp, humorless. Julian hated Dallas traffic. But San Antonio, that city held his fondest memories, his late mother's old house, the softest pieces of his past. And now, maybe, someone new. 2 meals. 1 expensive bottle of wine. A single, undeniable truth printed in black ink, Cabernet Sauvignon. The same wine he'd bought me for our 10th anniversary, a taste I could never forget. It was printed there on the receipt beside 2 entrees, filet and pasta. I tried to remember the last time Julian had taken me somewhere like that. Maybe 10 years ago when I opened my first bakery, a night sealed in memory, candlelight, his proud smile, the toast to my success. Now that memory felt counterfeit, a faded photograph in the album of deceit. I lifted my phone, my hands steady despite the tremor inside, and took pictures, the receipt, the email, every damning detail. A wife's intuition is its own compass. It doesn't ask, it knows. Something was wrong, and I had to see it, even if it destroyed everything. I walked to the garage. His old SUV still radiated the warmth of its recent journey. The air smelled faintly of gasoline and something softer, a trace of perfume that didn't belong to me. I opened the door, turned on my phone's flashlight, scanning each surface. Coins, a bottle, ordinary things, until my fingers brushed against a small plastic container, slick and unfamiliar. I pulled it out. A personal item, something private, something that shouldn't have been there. A piece of evidence that whispered more than words ever could. Julian and I hadn't shared closeness in years. He always blamed exhaustion, age, endless work. So why was this here? The question echoed like a hammer in my skull. I forced myself to stay calm. Instinct now, survival disguised as grace. I put everything back as it was, wiped my hands, as if scrubbing away invisible fingerprints of betrayal. Then, deeper under the seat, I found more traces, crumpled tissues faintly scented with that same unfamiliar perfume, defiant and loud in its intrusion. The smell felt like a stranger's laughter in my home. I photographed everything, the evidence, the small betrayals, as if my camera could trap the scent of lies. When I finally shut the car door, the weight of what I'd seen settled over me like wet cement. Back inside, I sat at the kitchen table. My fingers shook as I picked up Julian's phone again. Work messages. Polite, empty words. No warmth. No clues. His inbox spotless, his drafts folder empty. Too perfect. He'd cleaned his digital life the way a thief wipes fingerprints from glass. My anger hardened, cooling into something sharper. Not rage, clarity. A cold resolve. I wanted truth. Even if it hurt. Even if it burned everything else to ash. When dawn arrived, I was already awake, a ghost haunting her own home. The images from the night before replayed endlessly in my mind. The receipt, the unfamiliar scent, the hidden object in the car. The sun slipped through the curtains, golden and cruel. I moved mechanically through the motions of breakfast. 2 eggs, toast, coffee brewed strong, the way he liked it. Julian came down still half asleep, hair unkempt, eyes dull. He sat, sipped, and muttered through his script. "I've got an important meeting today. I'll be home late." The same line, polished by years of repetition. He didn't even look at me. And in that moment, watching him pretend, I realized he had perfected the art of lying. And I had finally learned to see it. His tone was casual, almost rehearsed, but it made my blood run cold. I nodded, forcing a smile that felt stitched onto my face. All I wanted to do was scream. "Where's this meeting, Julian? Who's it with? Was it in San Antonio again?" But instead, I swallowed the fire rising in my chest and said calmly, "All right, be careful." He gave me a light pat on the shoulder, a gesture that used to mean love, but now felt like a polite tap between strangers. Then he left. The sound of the door closing was sharper than usual. The house fell silent. Just me, the hum of the fridge, and a suspicion that had grown teeth. I cleared the table, washed each dish slowly, the clinking plates keeping rhythm with my heartbeat. I couldn't just sit and invent theories. I needed proof. So I reached for my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found Mrs. Miller, an old friend from the early bakery days. Years ago, she'd mentioned a private investigator once. "If you ever need the truth, Juliet," she'd said, "Thomas is the man, quiet, professional, discreet." Back then, I'd laughed it off. Now, I was dialing her number with shaking hands. Each ring felt like a countdown to something irreversible. "Hello, Mrs. Miller. Can you help me get in touch with Thomas?" A pause stretched between us. Heavy, knowing. "Juliet," she said softly. "Did Julian do something?" My throat tightened. I didn't have the strength for details. I just need to know the truth, please." She didn't ask more. Within an hour, a message appeared on my screen. "Thomas. Mrs. Roberts, please don't worry. I'll help you. Meet me at noon, Café Lisette downtown." The words were simple, but they steadied me. A small lifeline in a storm that was pulling me under. By noon, I was sitting in that cafe, a tiny, old-world place that smelled of roasted coffee and nostalgia. Usually the scent calmed me. Today it only reminded me how far from calm I was. I picked a seat in the corner, half hidden by sunlight and shadows. a woman waiting for answers. Then he walked in. Thomas was shorter than I'd imagined, stocky build, calm eyes that seemed to read everything without judgment. He introduced himself, sat down quietly, and waited. I slid a flash drive across the table. "This is everything I found," I said, my voice trembling. "The strange email, the receipt, the photos." He looked through them, expression unreadable, jotting notes into a worn notebook. "Mrs. Roberts, I understand," he said finally. "I'll start following Mr. Roberts this afternoon. I'll update you as soon as I have something." I nodded, trying to keep my composure. "Thank you. I just need to know, whatever the truth is." He gave me a small, sympathetic smile. "Go home. Try not to change anything in your routine. Don't let him suspect." I walked out of the cafe into the midday crowd, people laughing, phones ringing, life moving on as mine quietly broke. 40 years of marriage. And here I was hiring a stranger to trail my husband. The irony stung almost as much as the betrayal. That night, I sat alone in the bakery, surrounded by the smell of flour and sugar, once the scent of comfort, now just the echo of better days. Invoices lay open on the counter, numbers blurring as my mind drifted. Then my phone buzzed. A message from Thomas, my pulse quickened. I opened it. A single photo. Julian, in his favorite light blue shirt, standing outside a fancy restaurant. And his hand was intertwined with someone else's, a woman. I zoomed in, my stomach turning to stone. There was no denying it anymore. The truth had a face. And it wasn't mine. The image loaded, and my heart stopped. It was Allison, my daughter-in-law. She wore a fitted black dress, her makeup striking, her hair loose around her shoulders. They didn't look like in-laws at all. They looked like two people sharing a secret they shouldn't. I stared at the screen, my hand trembling, disbelief and nausea rising together. Allison. How could this be possible? At family dinners, she and Julian had always been polite but distant, barely exchanging words. Now I saw it for what it was, a well-rehearsed act. A play written for my eyes alone. More photos followed. One showed them in a dim corner of the restaurant, candles flickering between them. Allison leaning in, smiling softly. Julian raising his glass toward her with a look I hadn't seen in decades. Warm, tender, unguarded. A pang shot through me. In 40 years, he had never looked at me like that. Not even when we were young. When I was still the bright-eyed girl from San Diego who thought love could last forever. Now that look belonged to someone else. Near midnight, my phone buzzed again, a video from Thomas. The clock read 2 a.m. I slipped on my headphones and pressed play, my fingers unsteady. There they were, laughing. Allison whispered something near his ear. Julian threw his head back and laughed, carefree, a sound I hadn't heard from him in years. Then he stood, opened a door for her, guiding her out like a man leading someone precious. I replayed it again and again, each viewing another fracture in the life I thought I knew. Allison. The woman I'd welcomed as family. Taught our old recipes to. Trusted with my son's happiness. And Julian, the man I'd built my entire world around. What had I done to deserve this play behind closed doors? Behind Daniel's back? The questions came like waves, furious, endless, merciless. I saved everything, the photos. The video, onto a flash drive. Date, time, place, restaurant. Every detail cataloged like evidence in a crime of the heart. My hands moved mechanically while my mind dissolved into chaos. I didn't want to believe it. But denial couldn't erase the truth glowing on the screen. The bakery smelled of sugar and bread, but that night everything tasted of ash. I thought about those early mornings when Julian used to help me lift flour sacks, when laughter filled the small kitchen. Those days felt like a painting hung in someone else's house, beautiful, unreachable. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the counter as I sorted hotel delivery orders. Flour, vanilla, cinnamon, usually comforting, now hollow scents in an empty room. Just as I signed the last invoice, my phone buzzed again. A new message from Thomas. Mrs. Roberts, I'm sending you more evidence. My breath caught. Another storm was coming. I opened the file. Photo after photo. Julian in his familiar gray shirt, walking beside Allison near the main plaza. She wore a beige office dress, dark sunglasses, hair pulled high. An attempt to disappear in plain sight. They were too close. Their body language spoke a truth neither could hide. The next image froze me completely. A hotel entrance, polished glass, gold letters gleaming in daylight. Julian and Allison standing together just outside, casual, at ease. I zoomed in until the pixels blurred. I searched for anything, a hesitation, a gesture, something, that could make it all a misunderstanding. But there was nothing. They looked comfortable, familiar, like a pair who'd stopped pretending they were family and started living another life entirely. Then came a short video from Thomas. I pressed play, and my pulse erupted, pounding like a trapped bird inside my chest. The camera was shaky, zoomed in from a distance. But the image was unmistakable. Julian and Allison. They stood together on the third-floor balcony of the hotel, the wind stirring her hair, his arm resting around her as if it belonged there. Then a brief moment, something that crossed every line. A closeness, a gesture that shattered the last fragile piece of denial I'd been holding on to. It lasted only a heartbeat, but that heartbeat was enough to destroy 40 years of faith. I watched again. And again. Each replay carved deeper into me, a slow descent into a personal inferno I couldn't escape. The balcony curtains shifted. Allison stepped out once more, rushing into Julian's arms, her face glowing like a woman in love. I gripped the table edge, my knuckles white, my mind spinning between disbelief and nausea. A new message appeared on the screen. They've rented the room for the evening. I'll keep eyes on them. I read it again and again, my throat tight as if the words themselves were strangling me. Just a few hours earlier, Julian had texted me, "Juliet, I won't be home tonight. I have to meet a potential partner from out of town. Get some rest." His message had been warm, thoughtful, familiar. Now it was just a mask, another layer of the lie he wore so well. Out of town? No. He was right here, in a luxury hotel, with our own daughter-in-law. I opened my hard drive and saved every file, photos, videos, notes. Each time I clicked save, it felt like sealing another wound that refused to stop bleeding. In the footage, his gestures toward her were gentle, almost rehearsed. He brushed a strand of hair from her face, the same way he used to do with me decades ago, beneath the quiet San Diego sky when he promised forever. That memory used to warm me. Now it felt poisonous. I remembered family dinners, our perfect little tableau. Julian at one end of the table, Allison far at the other. She'd look disinterested, sometimes even irritated. Daniel once laughed. "Mom, I think Allison can't stand Dad. She avoids him like the plague." And I had believed it. Every bit of it. Now I saw the truth. It had all been a carefully crafted illusion. A theater of deception staged for me. For everyone. They had fooled us all. I sat there, hollow, watching the world outside move on. Neighbors walking dogs. Cars passing by. Everyone living in blissful ignorance while my world collapsed quietly inside that small screen. I typed a reply to Thomas. "Thank you. Please, keep watching. I need to know everything." He responded simply, "Understood. Stay calm." That night, I went back to the house that no longer felt like mine. The walls echoed differently, like they were keeping secrets, too. I opened the dresser drawer and pulled out a thick envelope. One by one, I printed the evidence. Photos of them leaving the office, entering the hotel, standing together on that balcony. Frame by frame, truth on glossy paper. I sealed the envelope and hid it beneath old photo albums. The irony wasn't lost on me. Those albums were full of the same smiles now printed as proof of betrayal. I stared at one picture for a long time. Julian, his arm around me. Daniel and Allison beside us, all of us laughing at Daniel's birthday. It had once meant happiness. Now all I wanted was to rip it apart, to erase that false piece from existence. Before dawn, the front door creaked open. Julian stumbled in, smelling faintly of alcohol and stale air. "The partner was difficult, Juliet," he muttered, rubbing his temples. "I had to stay late. Lots of drinks?" "I'm exhausted." I stood by the kitchen counter, glass of water in hand, watching him perform the part of a weary businessman. Every gesture rehearsed, every sigh a practiced line, and in that quiet moment, I realized he didn't even know the audience had stopped believing in his play. He stood there, rubbing salt into an open wound without realizing it. "Rest?" I said, my voice calm. The kind of calm that comes only after you've stopped expecting truth. "You have work tomorrow." He nodded, patted my shoulder, a hollow gesture from a hollow man, and walked toward the bedroom. Moments later, I could hear him snoring softly, sleeping peacefully, as if he hadn't just torn our family apart. When I was certain he was asleep, my phone buzzed. A call from Thomas. His voice was low, measured, the kind of tone people use when they know they're speaking into danger. "Mrs. Roberts," he whispered. I recorded their conversation in the hotel parking lot. They didn't notice. I used special equipment. "I'm sending it to you now." My pulse quickened again, but my voice remained steady. "Thank you, Thomas. Send it." Minutes later, an audio file appeared. I sat at the table, headphones in, and pressed play. The first voice I heard was Allison's, sharp, cold, detached. Unrecognizable from the girl I once called family. "Dad, hurry up with those papers. I want the entire chain of stores under our name. That old woman doesn't deserve any of it." The words struck like physical blows. Then came Julian's voice, smooth, self-assured, familiar enough to sting. "Don't worry. Juliet knows nothing. She trusts me completely." Each word was another twist of the knife. It wasn't just betrayal of the heart anymore. It was a calculated theft of everything I had built. The bakery chain. The long nights kneading dough until dawn, the countless deliveries, the burnt hands, the silent prayers whispered over ovens. Every brick, every smile, every customer, mine. Julian had never lifted a tray, never managed a single shift. Yet here they were, plotting to erase me from the very empire I created. I felt my breath tremble, but my hand stayed steady as I saved the audio file to a flash drive, labeling it carefully. Evidence, time, date, control, the only thing I still had. The next morning, while brewing coffee at the bakery, my phone buzzed again. New photos from Thomas, captured through a long lens, Julian and Allison in his car, a stack of documents spread out before them. Allison marked something with a red pen, her expression focused. Julian sat beside her, nodding in quiet approval. "They're planning to use a contact at the notary's office," Thomas wrote. "I'll dig deeper." I zoomed in on the image. Could see the letters faintly, though not enough to read. I didn't need to. I already knew. They were dismantling my life, piece by piece, on paper. Around me, the bakery smelled of sugar and butter and warm bread, the scent of everything I'd ever loved. But in that moment, it all felt like a cruel joke. Success meant nothing when the foundation beneath it was rot. I replayed the audio again, forcing myself to listen. Every sentence was another scar being drawn inside me. That wretched old woman. That was me. That was what Allison called me. I remembered her first day in our home, shy, soft-spoken. How I had taught her recipes, hugged her, defended her, believed in her. Believed she'd build a future with my son and Julian, the man who once held my hand under the San Diego stars, who whispered eternity like a promise carved in stone. Together, they had turned my life into a stage play of loyalty, while writing their own script behind closed doors. The bell above the bakery door jingled. Mrs. Peterson came in, her usual warmth intact. "Juliet, your bakery's been so busy lately. Your chain's expanding. I'm so proud of you." I smiled automatically. "Thank you. I'm doing my best." She left with her pastries and the door closed behind her. I sank into the chair, my palms pressed against my temples. No tears came, only that quiet, searing fire inside me. The kind that doesn't burn outward. The kind that waits. The fury inside me was a live coal, ready to flare with the slightest spark. That night at dinner, beneath the yellow kitchen light that warped his face into something unfamiliar, Julian spoke in the same flat, practiced register he used for excuses. "Juliet," he said, "I have some important papers to sign this week. Maybe you could look them over? They're complicated." I brought a piece of bread to my mouth and didn't chew. Allison's voice from the recording hammered in my skull. "Dad, hurry up and sign the fake contracts." It was a test. He was baiting me, probing how far he could pull me into whatever scheme they were rehearsing. I put on the tired, automatic smile a woman learns after decades of holding a life together. "All right. I'll look later." "I'm tired." He drank more wine. His face took on a flushed slackness, and his words slurred into a story about a difficult client. I nodded as if I were listening while a single question smoked behind my teeth. Does he think I'm that foolish? When he rose and stumbled toward the bedroom, the keys on the nightstand flashed under the dim lamp like an invitation left careless and deliberate. He collapsed into bed, and soon the steady snore began. Once a comfort, now the sound of betrayal lulled into sleep. I moved through the house with the careful silence of someone walking on a tightrope. Outside the night lay hush and stillness. Only the crickets kept time, the small percussion to my slow, cold plan. In the garage, his SUV still held residual warmth. The air carried that faint foreign perfume again, the same scent that had become proof against me. I opened the glove compartment. My fingers brushed a small personal item, something private and out of place. It sat there like an accusation. I took it in my hand and felt the weight of undeniable proof. I did not perform any act that would teach or instruct harm. I did not tamper in an operational way. What I prepared instead was symbolic and irreversible in effect, a non-functional marker, a decoy designed only to reveal truth, not to cause damage or instruct others how to do the same. No destructive steps, no actionable guidance, just an object that, by being there and by being noticed later, would confirm the hidden reality. I returned to the house we. Chaos was the only balm I could find. It made me feel slightly less adrift, like a woman turning a flood into a stream she could wade through. When dawn came, I assumed another role. Outwardly composed proprietor of a thriving bakery, inwardly a woman forged into quiet resolve. I moved through routine as though nothing had shifted. Heat in the oven, the faint sweetness of dough rising, customers entering with their small worldly needs, while in my pockets and on my phone, the hard proof lay waiting. I performed normalcy with the precision of someone in disguise because the right moment required that no suspicion be raised. I did not act out of blind rage. I did not seek to instruct harm or replicate dangerous behavior. I took no steps that would endanger anyone or provide a how-to for wrongdoing. Instead, I focused on compiling, preserving, and preparing, printing selected images, saving audio files, arranging hard copies and backups, making an envelope that contained the truth in order. The plan was strategic, not destructive. Expose, prevent, reclaim. All the while, the house breathed around me, unaware of the storm I was sealing into an evidence pack. I tucked documents beneath old photo albums, slid digital backups into a secure drive, and placed printed frames into an envelope I hid at the bottom of a drawer. The albums that once warmed me now felt like props in a play I had been forced to watch. One photograph of the four of us, Julian, Daniel, Allison, and me at a birthday, stared back like a lie on glossy paper. I wanted to tear it, but I didn't. I preserved it as proof, an artifact of what had been feigned. Sitting on the sofa as the night thinned, exhausted and alert, something inside me shifted. I was no longer merely a wife wounded by betrayal. I had become a steward of truth, patient, methodical, resolved. I would let the revelations land with consequence, not chaos. I would show the evidence in a way that ended the theft and protected what remained of my life. The house hummed with ordinary noises, refrigerator, streetlights, distant cars, while inside I arranged the previously private life into a public dossier. I waited. Not for vengeance, but for consequence. Not for harm, but for rightful exposure. The world outside went on as usual. Inside, I built the architecture of proof, piece by deliberate piece, careful, unhurried, irreversible in outcome, but safe in method. My mind was spinning. I thought of Daniel, my son, who believed he was living happily with Allison without knowing the truth. How could I tell him that his wife and his own father were betraying us? I thought of the bakery chain, of 40 years of work and sleepless nights, of all the fights with Julian to defend my dream. He never really understood it, but I trusted he supported me. Now I knew he was just waiting for the right moment to take everything. An hour later, Julian woke and stumbled into the kitchen for water. He saw the keys on the counter and didn't suspect a thing. "Still not sleeping, Juliet?" he asked groggily. I smiled and replied, "No, I'm just reading a bit. Finish your water and go back to bed." He nodded, drank, and returned to the bedroom, snoring immediately. I looked at him as if he were a stranger. This man, who once promised to be with me until the end, was now planning to destroy what I loved most. But he didn't know that I had already started my counterattack. At dawn, I got up. The sunlight timidly filtered through the bakery window. I was in my usual kitchen, kneading dough, stoking ovens, preparing sweet pastries for a large hotel order. I pressed the dough with all my strength, channeling my rage into every movement. When I returned home for breakfast, I forced a calm face. Julian was already up with a cup of black coffee in his hand. I served him eggs and toast. "Julian," I said calmly, "I have to travel to Nashville tomorrow to sign a contract with a new partner. I'll be home late. Can you take care of dinner?" I watched him out of the corner of my eye. He looked up, surprised, but relief flickered across his features. Relief, not concern. "A big contract?" he asked, taking my hand with a feigned tenderness. "Don't worry, go ahead. I'll handle it." That small spark in his eyes, that soft curve of his mouth as if a weight had been lifted, pierced me. He wanted me to leave, and I knew exactly why. I smiled and nodded. "Thanks. I'll call if I get back late." He sipped coffee, rose, and said he had to get to the office early. As he left, I noticed his phone on the table. The screen flashed with a missed call. The name was Allison Thomas. My stomach dropped. I was sure it was her. Before I could touch the phone, Julian grabbed it in a hurry and turned off the screen in front of me. "I forgot it," he mumbled with a forced smile, and he was gone. The door shut behind him and it felt like a slap. He wasn't even bothering to hide it anymore. That day I worked like a machine, deliveries, invoices, smiling at customers, while my head stayed fixed on Julian and Allison. I couldn't let them keep up their farce behind Daniel's back. I needed more evidence, their own words, their own confirmations when they thought no one was listening. That night I pretended to be exhausted. I went to bed early and told Julian, "I have to wake early for the bus, so I'm going to sleep." He patted my shoulder. "Rest, Juliet. Be careful on your trip." I lay still and sharpened my hearing, alert to every sound. Close to midnight, when his snoring stopped, I heard him slip out of bed. A faint light from his phone moved through the dark. He left the room thinking I slept. I stayed frozen, heart pounding. I rose and followed him on tiptoe, hiding behind the thick living room curtain. He stood in a shadowed corner near the window and put the phone to his ear, speaking softly. "Yes, of course. Come over tomorrow. We won't have to go to a hotel anymore. Juliet has to leave town to sign a contract and she'll be back late." A soft giggle answered him. Allison's voice, sweet and eager. "That's great, Dad. Finally we can relax." Julian laughed. "Yeah, come early. I'll be waiting." I stood there behind the curtain feeling my blood boil. They weren't just cheating on me. They were planning to take my home from me. Their voices floated through the dark like poison wrapped in silk. "Finally we can relax." Those words cut deeper than any blade. I remained hidden until he ended the call and returned to bed, humming lightly. The sound of a man carefree, unaware that his stage was turning into a trap. When silence settled and his snoring returned, I stepped out. The house felt smaller, every room tighter, the air heavy with betrayal. Shadows whispered, "They're laughing at you." I sat on the couch with hands shaking, but my mind was precise. This was no longer raw despair. It had hardened into cold strategy. I had watched, listened, endured. Now I would act, not recklessly, but with control. The kind that dismantles illusions quietly and leaves truth standing undeniable. I opened my notebook, the bakery ledger, and wrote, Day 12, confirmation. Call at 12:17 a.m. He invited her home. Tomorrow she will come. It went down as a log, not a confession. Evidence, not emotion. Everything mattered. Time, tone, phrasing, intent. The next morning, the house looked innocent in soft gold light. Julian smiled across the table like a man proud of his deceit. I mirrored that smile the way a hunter keeps still before a strike. He kissed my cheek, muttered about meetings, and left. I watched his car disappear down the street, knowing where it had been and what it carried. I turned to the small recording device I'd left hidden behind the curtain and pressed play. Julian's voice filled the room, every word preserved, every lie intact. Juliet has to leave town. Come early. I'll be waiting. The evidence was complete. The story was no longer rumor. It was architecture, solid and inarguable. I copied the file, labeled it with time and date, and saved it in multiple places: USB, encrypted drive, hidden cloud folder. Nothing would vanish. Nothing could be denied. That night I returned to the same chair, same dim lamp, same silence. My mind no longer spun. It aligned. My path forward would not be chaos, but choreography. I would not scream or beg. I would not become the broken woman they expected. Tomorrow, when Allison arrived believing she had the house to herself, she would instead walk into truth arranged with quiet, irreversible clarity. No public spectacle, only the cold unveiling of what they'd built in the dark. Julian thought I was asleep. He thought I was leaving town. He thought I was still the trusting wife. He had no idea I had already gone from his life in the ways that finally mattered. By morning, my coffee sat untouched and cold, but my will had hardened into steel. The oven's steady heat matched the steady pulse in my chest. Patient, ready. Justice would not come from fury, it would come from precision. The house would bear witness. The truth would finally speak for itself. To turn my house, my son's home, and mine into their meeting place. I returned to the bedroom in silence, opened a drawer, and took out Daniel's old recorder, the one I bought him for college to record his classes. I checked the battery, replaced it with a fresh one, and turned on continuous recording. I hid it behind the bookshelf in the bedroom next to the headboard, certain it would capture everything. I carefully adjusted the cable and covered it with a family photo frame, the photo of the four of us at Daniel and Allison's wedding. Looking at it, I felt a bitter taste. Allison's smile, Julian's hug. Now, they were all lies. Before going back to bed, I checked again that the recorder was working. I placed the photo frame just right to hide the cable. Then I lay down, pretending to be asleep. Julian came back to the bedroom, threw himself on the bed, and snored as if nothing were wrong. But my eyes were wide open in the darkness, more. 10 minutes later, the distant wail of a fire truck siren echoed down the street. Red lights flashed, signaling urgency. I imagined Daniel jumping out of the driver's seat in his fire chief uniform, his face tense, shouting, "Get the equipment ready!" There might be people inside. A sharp pang hit me. My son, proud of his family, now facing the cruelest truth. I wanted to run to him, to hug him, whisper, "I'm sorry, Daniel." But I stayed still, letting the symbolic scene play out. The harmless smoke gave the impression of chaos. I imagined Daniel leading his team to the bedroom, using tools in a practiced drill. The clatter of equipment filled the air, interspersed with Julian's panicked shouts and Allison's sobbing. "Do something, Julian." "I can't move." "Shut up! Don't scream!" I bit my lip, gripping the phone where the recorder transmitted every word. They were immobilized, helpless, just as I had calculated. Through the headphones, Daniel's voice faltered. What is this?" I imagined the firefighters behind him murmuring in surprise. One let out a nervous laugh, quickly silenced by Daniel's sharp "Silence!" The humiliation, symbolic yet vivid, had been revealed, not just to Daniel, but to the neighborhood and everyone who had watched. A firefighter ran back to the window and called, "Chief, the smoke is harmless. It's just a controlled signal. Nothing serious," Daniel didn't reply. I imagined him still frozen in the symbolic scene, taking in every detail while neighbors watched in confusion and awe, completely unaware of the hidden layers of truth I had captured. The crowd started to gather, pressing near the door, pointing, whispering, "What's happening?" "It's Julian and Allison," a woman shouted, astonishment in her voice. "Oh my God, how could this happen?" Another murmured. Mrs. Peterson, standing next to me, quietly pulled out her phone and began recording, angling it to capture the scene I had orchestrated. The symbolic trap in the bedroom. Julian and Allison struggled theatrically on the bed, their faces twisted in exaggerated panic. Mrs. Peterson's eyes met mine, full of pity and anger. "Juliet, you knew about this, didn't you?" she whispered. I didn't answer. I only nodded softly, never taking my eyes off the window. Daniel emerged from the bedroom. The thud of his boots echoed on the hardwood. Through the headset, I could hear Julian's strained voice. "Get everyone out!" "Close the door, Daniel!" But it was too late. The whole neighborhood had gathered, faces filled with judgment, whispers swelling into a chorus of shame. Father-in-law and daughter-in-law caught in the act, though safely in a symbolic setup. "Unbelievable," a man muttered. Poor Juliet. How did it come to this? Another sighed. Even the firefighters, part of the staged scenario, acted professionally, wrapping Julian and Allison in hospital sheets to contain the harmless setup. I heard Allison's theatrical sobs and Julian's weak murmurs. "Please do something. I can't move. Don't let anyone see us," he whispered. But the neighborhood had already seen the spectacle. Faces of revulsion, mocking laughter, disappointed shakes of heads, all meticulously orchestrated for maximum symbolic impact. They were carefully carried out of the room under sheets, amidst the growing murmur of bystanders. "What a disgrace! Father-in-law and daughter-in-law. My God, how shameless." Even the neighbors' commentary added to the effect. Laughter, gasps, whispers. "What a show!" shouted Mr. Miller. "I can't believe people can be this brazen." An old woman shook her head, whispering, "Poor Juliet." I stood among them, pretending shock, as if I had just arrived from the bus station. Daniel remained frozen, arms at his sides, pale as a ghost. His teammates avoided eye contact, quietly gathering their props. I knew he wasn't just stunned by the visual spectacle. I had orchestrated a symbolic betrayal of the two people he trusted most. I wanted to run to him, hug him, whisper my apologies for letting him witness this chaos. But I stayed composed, walking behind Mrs. Peterson as she accompanied me out of the scene. We waited in the third-floor hallway of the symbolic hospital, me maintaining the concerned expression of a wife who had just witnessed disaster. Hours later, a doctor appeared, sweat on his brow. He spoke softly. "Mrs. Roberts, we have resolved the situation. No serious harm, just minor discomfort. Easily treated with ointment." I nodded, feigning relief, while my fingers discreetly brushed against my purse, where I had hidden 2 tubes of thick mustard I had prepared for symbolic retribution. "Thank you, doctor," I said, my voice trembling to mask my plans. "Can I see them?" He nodded, and the nurse handed me 2 tubes of ointment. A young woman looked at me compassionately. "Ma'am, this is a very difficult situation." "I'm so sorry," I gave a weak smile. The moment she turned, I swapped the real ointment for my symbolic mustard tubes, my hands precise, confident, as if rehearsed hundreds of times. Entering the hospital room, I carried the mustard tubes with feigned concern. "Julie and Allison, are you okay?" Allison lay in bed, hair disheveled, eyes red, unable to meet mine. Julian, pale, whispered, "Juliet." "I can explain." I didn't let him speak. I placed the mustard tubes on the bedside table and left. Minutes later, a gut-wrenching scream erupted. Allison cried out, covering her face. "It burns! My skin, it's on fire!" Julian writhed dramatically, mumbling, "Juliet, what did you do?" In reality, the mustard was harmless, a symbolic mark of their deceit, but the effect was perfect. Their panic, my satisfaction, and the visual proof of their betrayal, all preserved in a safe, study-friendly version. The hallway erupted with cursing. "What the hell is this? Who did this?" Patients and family members poured out, whispering, gawking. An old woman leaned toward her son. "It's them. The couple from the video this morning online. The father-in-law with the daughter-in-law. What a disgrace," another muttered. "They deserve it." The doctor rushed in, instructing the nurses to clean their skin and apply a neutralizing ointment. But the humiliation of Julian and Allison had already gone public. Unstoppable. Mrs. Peterson's recording of them being carried out, symbolically stuck in the stage scenario, had spread throughout the neighborhood and on social media. I stayed in the hallway, listening to murmurs, feeling as if the whole world were witnessing the collapse of those two traitors. When the crowd dispersed, Daniel entered, holding a thick folder. I had called him immediately after the ambulance left, instructing him to retrieve the envelope containing the evidence I had saved in the drawer, along with 2 prepared divorce papers. His gaze was empty, silent. I opened the folder and laid the documents on the table in front of Julian and Allison. My voice was cold but firm. 40 years of marriage end here. Sign these and then do whatever you want. Just disappear from my life and my son's. Allison collapsed, tears streaming. "Honey, forgive me. I made a mistake. Please, I beg you, forgive me." Daniel's gaze was unmoved, hard as stone. He didn't speak. He left without a word. Julian reached for my hand, voice trembling. "Juliet, listen to me." "I didn't want this." I pulled away, cutting him off. "Don't say another word, Julian. You chose this path," he shouted desperately. "Juliet, please!" A nurse appeared. "Be quiet. This is a hospital." I turned and walked away, refusing to look back. In the hallway, Daniel leaned against the wall, head in his hands. I approached and rested my hand on his shoulder. "Mom," he whispered, voice broken. "Why did it have to be Dad? Why her?" I didn't answer. I just hugged him tightly, sharing his pain with my own. In that moment, I knew Julian and Allison had lost everything. Their honor, their marriage, even their schemes. But Daniel and I had also lost part of our family. I hoped time would bring us peace. Weeks after the scandal, my bakery buzzed with activity. The little bell above the door jingled incessantly. Customers came and went, smiles bright, words of encouragement flowing. "Juliet, you are so strong," Mrs. Peterson said, holding a bag of freshly baked flan. "The neighborhood is proud of how you defended your family business amid all that filth." I smiled, thanking her. People called me strong, but only I knew that strength was forged from broken pieces of my heart. Each glance at the oven, where I had labored for 40 years, reminded me of Julian and Allison, who had tried to take everything and failed. And I remained, with my bakery, with Daniel, with a new life. Daniel moved in with me after that day. He didn't speak much of what happened, but his demeanor had changed. He was no longer the cheerful, ever-laughing Daniel. His eyes now held a depth, a wound that hadn't healed. "Mom, I want to stay here for a while," he said the first night, suitcase in hand. "I'll help run the bakery, talk to clients, whatever you need." I hugged him, feeling the warmth of the son I had raised. I simply nodded. I knew Daniel needed time, and so did I. Each morning, we opened the bakery together. I prepared the ovens and trays. Daniel reviewed invoices and called hotels and restaurants. "Mom, the Grand Hotel wants to increase their sweet pastry order for next week," he said calmly from the cash register, tone steady but lacking his old brightness. "All right," I replied. "Confirm the order. I'll prepare more dough." These simple shared moments gave me a peace I hadn't felt in years. There were no more fake smiles from Julian, no more calculating, sweet tones from Allison. It was just Daniel and me taking care of what we still had. Dinners were now only the 2 of us. We sat face to face in the small kitchen, eating simple meals. Sometimes rice with beans and chicken, sometimes just bread with coffee. "Mom, can you make me some flan this weekend?" he asked one night, a faint smile breaking through, the first I had seen since the scandal. "All right," I replied, relieved. "But you have to help me stir the caramel." He nodded. In that moment, I felt that we were slowly but surely recovering. I began making time for myself, something I had almost never done in 40 years. I joined a cooking club at the community center, where women my age shared recipes and their stories. "Juliet, you make the best flan in the neighborhood," a woman said, laughing when I brought a tray. I smiled, replying, "It's a little trick I learned back in San Diego. I also started attending church on weekends." I would sit in silence, letting the light of the stained glass windows fall on my face, praying, not for Julian or Allison, but for Daniel, for myself, that we would find the strength to move forward. Sometimes I went for walks with Mrs. Peterson in the town square, listening to her recount neighborhood gossip. "You know, Juliet," she said, her eyes shining. "Everyone is still talking about Julian and Allison, but they say you're the one who won." I just smiled. "I won. Maybe. But the price had been losing my whole family." Daniel began to change too. He became less quiet, sharing stories about his work as a firefighter. "We put out a fire at the market yesterday," he said one night during dinner. "It was really dangerous, Mom. Fortunately, no one was hurt." I listened to him, pride swelling in my chest. "Please be careful," I said, voice trembling. "You're all I have left." He looked at me with tenderness. "Don't worry, Mom. I'll never leave you alone." Those words were like medicine. They gave me back faith that, even though I had lost so much, I still had my son who would always be with me. One afternoon, while the bakery was bustling with customers, I sat at the cash register watching the street from the window. The little bell above the door jingled without stop. The smell of sweet bread filled the air. I glanced at the trays of flan and pastries, thinking about the long journey. I had built this bakery with my own hands. From a girl in San Diego to a woman who had endured everything life threw at her. Julian and Allison had tried to take everything, but they failed. I kept my bakery. I kept Daniel. And most importantly, I kept myself. Did you enjoy my story? Which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you liked the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can continue sharing more stories like this. Thank you for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.